This might be a terrible idea. I'm trying to build a precision workbench out of the worst lumber Home Depot sells. And if this wood moves, twists, or does what construction lumber loves to do, this whole thing will be a waste of time. But if it works, this might be the best bench that I've ever built, and you might be able to build one too for cheap. The game plan. This is the design my friend Steve and I came up with. My requirements were simple. 1. It needs to be 3 feet by 6 feet. B. It needs to be easy to build. And Roman numeral 3, it needs everything. Dovetail clamps, vacuum clamping, 140 precision MFT holes, magnetic catch pockets for hardware, storage for sustainers, sandpaper, and the clamps I use on every project. It needs leveling feet. It needs to be solid as a rock and not move, but also move when I want it to. You know, the usual stuff. So here's the plan. We're going to build the entire frame out of crappy construction lumber from the big box store, which honestly makes me a little nervous. I don't think that this is going to come out straight, but if we can pull it off, I think it's going to look incredible and be stupid affordable. So first, we need to go find the worst lumber that Home Depot has. I hear this all the time. I'd build stuff like that too if I had access to good hardwood, and apparently most people don't. They're stuck with these. Hockey sticks, pretending to be 2x4s that the big box stores shove down our throats. Now, as an artist, I'm not a big fan of AI art, if you can even call it that, but I saw this the other day. Someone asked AI to generate the forest where Home Depot sources their 2x4s. And honestly, I think the robot nailed it. Anyway, here's a trick for you. Don't buy 2x4s from the big box store. Buy 2x8s or 2x10s instead. Now, these boards usually have better grain along the edges, and the center, the part that you don't want anyway, is where all the instability lives. So instead of fighting bad lumber, we just cut out the garbage in the middle and we make our own 2x4 stock. And usually it's kind of cheaper. So here's the wild part. The 2x4s that I checked were sitting around 17 to 20% moisture, which is a lot if you didn't know. But these 2x8s, to my surprise, were sitting around 8 to 9% moisture, which is totally fine for a workbench, and kind of surprising that Home Depot has wood that's that dry. So instead of starting with junk, like the 2x4s, we're starting with something that we can actually work with. Now, we just need to mill it and use a bunch of heavy machinery, but that's why we're woodworkers. We like to buy stuff. Okay, this is embarrassing. I wanted to illustrate what we're about to do in this milling process, but I didn't want my rear end facing the camera. You would be so lucky. So I held the square awkwardly from behind, and I had no clue that it was propped up on a tab and that the line I was drawing was not straight. Can't win them all, right? So I've cut all my parts to length, leaving them oversized by a few inches that I'll trim down later. Then on the bandsaw, I cut out the middle of the board that causes all the instability. Now you can do this on a table saw, and you can do this with a track saw, and I've done both, but it can be a little tricky if there's tension in the boards. The blade can easily pinch if you're not careful, and even if you are careful, it can be a real pinch changer. One time I had a track saw bind when I was doing this, and I forced it, and it jumped the track and made me invent a new swear word. Well, thankfully, I had 2 hands on the track, but if I had one, it could have been interesting. So my preferred way to do this is just with a nice resawing blade on the bandsaw, way safer in my opinion. After that, I go over to the jointer, and that gives me one flat face and then one edge that's square to it. Then I send everything through the planer to bring everything to a consistent thickness, and then finally over to the table saw to rip everything to width. And I'll be honest, when I first got into woodworking, I had no idea this process even existed. I bought a planer and then ripped everything on the table saw, and I just assumed that the planer would have fixed everything and made everything square. So I glued it up, clamped it flat, and I woke up the next day to a panel that was twisted and looked like a potato chip. And that, my friends, is the day I learned the difference between jointing, joining, and joinery, which is all very confusing when you're just starting out. So I put a jointer on the dream tool list, did a few projects for a friend, used that money to buy this jointer. I paid, I hope you're sitting down, probably on the toilet, I'm sure, $525 brand new in 2015. Now here's a good shot of what a 2x8 looked like before. And after the milling process and glue up, I've got decent grain. I mean, I'd give it a B-. It is from Home Depot after all. And some nice chunky square parts for my bench. Not bad. Now I did that process to all of the 2x8s I bought for this project, which in total cost me $79, which I think is really good for doing this for a workbench. And while a table saw, jointer, and planer can be serious investments, they do really pay off in the long run when you're able to mill up your own lumber. That's really where you can save money. Now, on this day, something kind of hilarious happened, and it was pretty ironic. I was covered in sawdust, and my buddy John from Lincoln Street texted me the phrase, "Whitwork sucks," which is fair, but I was curious what sparked that. So he sends me a screenshot of a comment that someone left on his channel about me, basically saying that I don't build anything anymore, that I've fallen off the map, and that all I do is sell stuff. And I'll be honest, I was really trying hard not to be mad, but I couldn't help it. I was mad because I was literally standing there covered in sawdust with splinters in my hands in the middle of building this. This entire video took me 6 weeks to do, and there's someone out there saying, I don't build anything anymore. But after I cooled down, I did something I normally don't do. I responded to the guy, and we went back and forth for a little bit, and here's what I learned. He actually likes my content. But his perception was that I don't build anything because that was his experience of my videos. Now, even though all the things he was saying about me were provably false, and I've worked really hard for 3 years to not do tool reviews and to do very hard build videos and to build a business behind YouTube that's not dependent on YouTube income or affiliate sales from promoting tools, the reality is this guy is only being shown videos that promote stuff. And that's sadly how YouTube can work sometimes. You can be subscribed to someone, you can like their videos and still not see most of what they make. You just get shown what you tend to click on or what would make YouTube the most amount of ad dollars by you watching it. So if you're watching this and there are creators you like that you've subscribed to, but you haven't seen them in a while, go to their page and check on them. Don't just rely on YouTube's algorithm to feed you videos. There's this thing called the subscription tab. You should use it. Because it's possible that there are creators that you like who are working hard, building real projects to not just get shown. Okay, rant over. And if you were wondering if there was any tension in these 2x8s, check out how much this middle section that I cut out immediately warped when set free. Be careful, my friends. A few months ago, I saw an incredible project from a guy named Ben Ueda. He was building what looked like a concrete flying saucer in the middle of the desert. It was one of those builds where you get tired just watching someone else work hard and get tired. I saw someone ask in the comments, but was the juice worth the squeeze? And Ben replied with one sentence, the squeeze is their reward. The squeeze is the reward. How good is that? I've got a friend named Britt who loves to fish. We'll drive past a random pond and suddenly it's like he's a 12-year-old again. Hey bro, just give me 5 more minutes. He never keeps the fish, but he loves the process of fishing. For him, trying to catch the fish is the reward. And I've realized that's kind of how I am with woodworking. It's not really the finished piece that brings me the most satisfaction. It's the figuring it out, the problem solving, the squeeze, the trying to catch the thing. That is the reward. So when it came to joinery on this workbench, I could have used pocket screws, dominoes, dowels, all totally fine options, but honestly, kind of boring because I know how to do them. I wanted to try something I don't do very often, which is half lap joints. They're not that hard, but for whatever reason, I wanted to see if I could really nail them. And to make it more interesting, I decided to try them on the BANDSAW, which I'm sure other people had done before, but I just don't see a lot of people doing it that way, and I wondered if it was even possible. My design partner Steve thought it was a terrible idea, and he let me know repeatedly. He said the right way would be to use a dado stack on the table saw, and yeah, I know he's probably right, but I've done it that way. It works great. It's fine, but I didn't feel like setting all of that up, and the bandsaw was already dialed in, and honestly, I didn't even know if it would work at the bandsaw, and that's where the squeeze was. Now, if I was a good YouTuber, I would drag the suspense out, make you really wonder if I pulled it off, tease if there was a bit of drama, even if I need to invent it. And then eventually, after an ad break, naturally, I would reveal the world's best half-lap joints, complete with a brand new Half-Lap Joint Academy course that you could buy right now for 40% off, but only for the next 24 hours. That's actually not a bad idea. Well, they turned out really good. There was no drama, and there is no half-lap course, sadly. But I will share with you the 4 things that I did right. The first was that I used a marking wheel to lay out my cuts. Second, I used this switchable magnet as a repeatable stop. Third, my bandsaw was tuned perfectly. And fourth, I had a really good bandsaw blade, and it was probably one of the cheaper ones that you can buy. So, for all you bandsaw owners out there who are frustrated with your bandsaw performance, if you've never heard of the Alex Snodgrass bandsaw method, then I just became your best friend and you're welcome. I tuned my bandsaw using his 6-step method, and ever since I learned it a few years ago, I've gone from hating my experience at the bandsaw to looking for excuses to how to use the bandsaw. Now, this is kind of cool, and it was totally not planned. While I was in the middle of this project, I got a text from Alex, whom I've never met in person, and he said he was going to be teaching a class at a local woodcraft near me, and he asked if we could meet up. So, after I picked myself up off the floor, I said, only if we can record a video of you teaching my audience how to tune up their bandsaws. So, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we pause the current program to present to you, for free, a 2-minute masterclass in how to tune your bandsaw, featuring the world's leading bandsaw expert, Alex P. Snodgrass. Actually, I don't really know what his middle name is, but Alex P. Snodgrass sounds kind of legit.
All right, step number 1 on a bandsaw is really the most important setup. You want to make sure that you're always putting the deepest part of the gullet right in the center of the wheel. A bandsaw wheel has a crown. And when you've got a crown and you're putting the blade, which is flat, right in the middle, all you're doing is giving it a pivot point. What we want to do is back it up so that the deepest part of the gullet's in the center of the wheel. That way, we're using leverage, not force. We're putting all the tension and rigidity at the cutting edge, and then the only thing that these side guides have to do is to prevent the back edge from fishtailing. Now, step 2, you want to make sure that your tension is right. Always check tension on the left-hand side of the saw, never the right-hand side. Reason being, the right-hand side has a guard, guide, table, insert, all that giving the blade resistance. I always like to tell people to lay their finger right on top of their guard and tap as hard as they would like. Shouldn't be able to get much more than about 1/4 of an inch of deflection. All right, now step 3, we want to adjust those side guides front to back, whether you're using blocks or bearings. You want to make sure that the front edge of whatever your side guide is just behind the deepest part of the gullet. Remember, your tooth set begins at the gullet. So if you bring the side guides into the gullet, all you're going to do is flatten those teeth out. And once you flatten those teeth out, it doesn't matter how you have it set up. That blade, once it forms a knife edge, is going to try to seek the easiest route through the wood. Step 4, I think, is just about as important as where that blade rides on the wheel, and that is the thrust bearing. We want that thrust bearing close, but not so close that it's touching and turning constantly. The reason being, if it's touching and turning constantly, it's pushing on the back edge of that blade, causing that front to deflect one way or the other, which is going to cause just a little bit of drift. Both top and bottom, as close as you can get. The moment you begin to cut, the bearing should begin to turn. The moment you stop cutting, it should slow and stop turning. All right, now step 5 is adjusting the side guides to the blade. In the past, we've been told use feeler gauges, dollar bills, anything you can to get them as close as possible. I feel like it's going to destroy your blade prematurely if you get them that close. And the reason being, in the past, we were putting all the tension and rigidity in the middle, so if you move the back, the front moved the same amount. Now we're putting all the tension and rigidity at the cutting edge, so now we can allow that back to move a little bit and still get an accurate cut, because the front now moves less than 1/10 that it did when all the tension and rigidity was in the middle. All right, now in order to set the table so that it's absolutely accurate, get a piece of 2x that has been joined at the bottom edge. 6 inches is going to give you the most accuracy. This is an 8-inch piece, so it's even more accurate. So basically what we want to do is we want to cut into this piece just about 1/4 of an inch, back it out, simply turn it around. If the blade will go back into that cut, we know that the table is level across the whole surface, not just up one side or the other, like a simple square would.
All right, Alex, I've watched your video probably 5 or 6 times, and I set this new Carter blade up. Having looked at all the things you look at, what kind of grade do you give me? How'd I do?
Give it an A+. I don't think I could set it up better myself.
How dare you? I'll pay you later. So big thanks to Alex P. Snodgrass for being a good sport and showing us his setup. I used to hate the bandsaw until I stumbled upon his channel. For blades, I've been using these Carter blades for a while based on recommendations from a few industrial woodworkers I know, and I honestly didn't even realize that Alex helped design them. So when I asked him if I was using the right blade, he thought I was joking. And just to be clear, this is not sponsored. I don't have any affiliate links for Carter. I don't make anything if you buy one of these. I just like sharing stuff that I work, especially when they're affordable. These are about $44 for a blade, and the blade that most people recommend for resawing from a very well-known brand is over $200. I've used both, and I think this cheaper one performs significantly better for a fraction of the price. So just passing along a gem in case you need a good blade recommendation for your bandsaw. A while back, I got a message from someone who was stuck trying to build their very first workbench. They wanted it to be perfect, the ultimate bench, right out of the gate. And they got so stuck that they never actually built anything. And yeah, the obvious answer is just let go of perfection and start. But I know that's easier said than done, especially if you're a perfectionist. So maybe this can help you if you're in that spot. Here's every workbench that I've had over the last 18 years. My first workbench was the garage floor, the concrete. I had nothing, but I wanted to make something, so it didn't stop me. Eventually, I got tired of working on the concrete, so I built a folding bench that I found in a magazine. There's no pictures. This was 2008, but it looked something very similar to this, and it taught me a lot. Then we moved, and my next bench was an old door that I found on the trash, and I just set it onto sawhorses that I also found. After that, I built a big rolling bench, stained it black because I was a monster. I don't know what I was thinking. And it was pretty cool, but it was also not very functional. Then I built a house, and I went right back to the plywood on sawhorses because that's what I had. And then eventually, when I had some time, I built the bench that I've used for the last 7 years, the Ron Paulk bench. And that thing is awesome. It's portable, it's amazing, and it really served me well. But over time, throughout all the iterations, I started to figure out what I actually needed in a workbench and what I thought that I needed but really didn't. And that's what this build is. After 18 years of trial and error, this is my shot at building what an ultimate workbench looks like for me based on my preferences and my style of flow. So if you're stuck or overthinking it, and you need someone to come alongside of you to help you build the thing so that you can build other things, we got your back. We designed this bench with you in mind so that you can build something simple, affordable, but also really solid while growing your skills as a woodworker. It's packed with a bunch of features that you can include or leave out depending on how you like to work. And if you don't have the time to make your own design or don't want to figure out all of this through trial and error, you can grab the beautiful and clear digital plans at whitworks.shop. You can build it exactly like I'm doing, or you can keep it simple and only build the version that you need. So moments ago, I kind of glazed over a little important detail of how I added custom levelers on the inside of the bench. Like these things right here. You may have noticed it. Now, I didn't think it was that interesting, but when I showed the bench to my Patreon community, people started asking immediately how to level a bench on uneven garage floors and if I had thought of that. So I figured it's probably worth showing you what I did, and it's not an original idea to me. I stole it from one of my favorite woodworkers on YouTube, Keith Johnson. I watch everything Keith puts out. He's insanely talented, and one thing he does really well is hide his leveling feet. He recesses them into the piece so they're functional, but you never really see them. Now, I don't know if he invented that idea. Probably not, but he's the first person that I saw do it, and if you've ever struggled with leveling furniture, this is a great tip for you. I found the biggest threaded levelers I could and immediately realized this is going to take a pretty specific set of holes to pull off. Instead of ordering 3 different specialty size Forstner bits that I'm not even sure even exist, I wanted to see if I could cut these recesses quickly, accurately, and repeatedly with the tool I've been getting to know, the Shaper Origin. Now, a lot of people ask, what is the difference between a CNC and the Origin? And this is actually a perfect example. With the Origin, I can design everything right on the tool, and if something's off, I can tweak it on the fly, which you really can't do with a CNC. So for this, I measured a few key points of the levelers, created 3 circles to match those diameters, and then I set each one to a different depth. The goal being a clean, stepped pocket that the leveler can thread into directly. Now here's where it gets really powerful. I used a feature called Probe Rectangle, which lets the tool find the exact center of my workpiece by referencing the edges using the router bit that's in the spindle. So now, every cut that I make is perfectly centered to the workpiece. And because I've got fixed reference stops on this workstation that I didn't even know existed until recently, I can drop each leg into the same position over and over and over again, rerun the file, and batch out however many of these I need in no time. And since Bench Pilot is running the cut, once I hit go, I don't even have to touch the Shaper Origin, drive it, anything. I just watch it and take a little bit of a break. Now here's what the pockets look like. The threaded posts were a little long, so I had to trim them down with an angle grinder. And here's another quick tip. If you ever have to do this, run 2 nuts onto the thread first. So after you cut it, when you back one of them off, it cleans the threads on the way out. The blocks were also cut a little long on purpose, so I trimmed those to final length on the bandsaw, added the threaded inserts, and now we've got 4 custom leveling feet ready to go that can be glued into place and help compensate for any unevenness in the floor. As I've gotten older, I've really come to believe that it's better to give than to receive. A few months ago, I had a crazy idea. There are some local subscribers of mine, the Fraleys, who run a really great woodworking business. But the bandsaw that they've been using just isn't beefy enough for some of the stuff they want to build. So for the last 11 months, I've been asking Harvey to sponsor a bandsaw giveaway. They never said no, but they also never said yes. So finally I said, okay, here's the deal. The Fraleys have one of your competitors' bandsaw and it sucks. What if we give them a Harvey bandsaw, upgrade it with the new Big Eye fence, and I get a shot of us throwing the other one in a landfill? And they said, you promise? So we got to surprise the Fraleys with an incredible bandsaw, a heavy-duty spider base, and the brand new Big Eye fence that fits on most bandsaws. And getting to watch them set it up, make the first cuts, was a whole lot more fun than getting a new tool for myself. And what made it even cooler, James had a failed project sitting there, a cut he couldn't complete on his old bandsaw because it failed. So we put the Harvey to the test, and watching that 3 horsepower motor power through it like it was butter, dead true, was pretty awesome. So special thanks to Harvey for agreeing to my crazy idea and helping me upgrade a subscriber's shop. That says a lot. And if you've been fighting an underpowered bandsaw or dealing with a fence that never stays put, Harvey might be the solution that you've been looking for. You can check them out at harveywoodworking.com. Oh, and instead of throwing away the old bandsaw into the landfill, we did the responsible thing and we turned it into a coffee station. Naturally. One of the things I've always loved about the Polk-style bench is the shelf right under the work surface. It's a huge space saver and a great place to drop tools mid-project, which is what I loved about it. But the problem is, I suffer from a condition known as HSS, Horizontal Surface Syndrome, which means any flat surface I own immediately becomes storage for random crap. And if you look at my old bench, that shelf turned into a catch-all for everything. It also had a lip on it, which was great for holding tools and amazing at holding sawdust. So for this build, we went with a flat shelf instead. The hope being that it would discourage me from storing stuff there long term, and more importantly, it would actually be very easy to clean. Yeah, this piece I worked really hard on, it doesn't fit. I should have installed it before gluing up the top of the frame. Easy fix, right? Just cut it in half. Just don't cut it the wrong way like I did, because somehow even that didn't fit. At this point, I'm about 80% sure if I cut it the other way, it'll work. So yeah, pretty dumb mistake. But what turned out to be bad news for me ended up being good news for a viewer named Nathan. He sent me these domino clamp connector things that he makes a few weeks ago. I like the idea, but I just didn't have a reason to use them. Well, now I do, because I don't have clamps long enough for this. So these are basically going to act as permanent clamps and pull the two halves together while the glue dries. And honestly, it worked pretty well. And the silver lining here is I finally got to use the dovetail clamp grooves built into the side of the bench. So this step didn't really go according to plan, but I'll take it and move on. If you're building a workbench and using sheet goods for the top, it's really tempting to cut it to final size first and then attach it to your frame. Good luck with that. I found it way easier to cut it slightly oversized, about 1/4 inch total, so that you got a little overhang on all sides. Then you attach it and come back with a flush trim bit and clean it up to the frame. And the result is a perfect edge every time. It also has the added benefit of fooling anyone who walks into your shop into thinking that you actually know what you're doing and that you can build things square and perfect. So there's that. The one thing I learned the hard way, don't glue down your top, because if it gets damaged, you'll want to be able to replace it. And if it's glued, you're basically rebuilding a whole bench at that point. Now, this next part is where my perfectionism and my graphic design background combine into something a little unhealthy. Remember earlier when I said, just build the bench, don't overthink it? Yeah, I don't listen to myself. I spent way too much time laying out every screw so that they're perfectly spaced and visually balanced. I know, I probably need to talk to someone about that. If you're wondering why the top overhangs the cabinets, it's because we wanted to make room for these casters. We wanted something that could lift the bench up when needed, but stay completely out of the way when it's not. So you're not kicking them every time you walk by. Steve actually put me onto these. I'd never seen this style before. They're made from a small company, super simple, surprisingly heavy duty, honestly, pretty slick. One of the nagging things about my last bench was that while the top was incredibly useful, there really wasn't a great way to take advantage of all of the space underneath. It was designed for portability, which is awesome, but for me, it left a lot of usable space on the table. So after paying attention to all the little friction points in my workflow over the last few years, I decided to build out that space with a set of cabinets designed to speed things up. Now, there are 4 different styles in here. One is a short cabinet built around a specific German drawer system called the Sys AZ. Not cheap, definitely buy once, cry once, but they're awesome. You can fully pull out a sustainer and open the lid without removing it, which I like. Then there's a cabinet for sandpaper, one for clamps, and one more general catch-all cabinet. I won't go step by step into all of these because at the end of the day, we're just building boxes, but I will walk you through how I build one of them. One of the biggest light bulb moments that I had years ago was realizing that for shop cabinets, you don't actually need that much plywood. Most of the time, I'm just using full panels for the sides and then 2 to 3 inch wide stretchers to tie everything together. It saves material and it makes it really easy to get a square, true box. Now, there are a million ways to join this stuff. Glue and brad nails, screws, pocket holes. I've done all of it and they're fine. But these days, my favorite way, just because of speed and accuracy, is using the domino, which, yes, is absolutely a luxury tool for a hack like me. But if you plan on building a lot of cabinets and you care about time and honestly, enjoyment, I don't know a faster way to do this. Now, I used to hear people say, I use the domino for alignment, not strength, and I never understood that. And then I got one. And now I totally get it. You can batch out mortises really quickly, and when you assemble everything, it just lines up because of the precision of the tool. The edges are flush, which is my favorite part about the whole process. Things just stay where they're supposed to and they don't slide around. And if you've been thinking about getting one, but don't want to pay full price, here's a thought. Festool just released an updated version of the domino, and a cordless one is coming out in a few months. And so there's a decent chance that there's going to be a bunch of used ones about to hit the market from people who are upgrading. Maybe. Probably. I don't really know, but it's worth keeping an eye out in case you've ever wanted one of these, but you did not want to pay full price, which I don't blame you. And just so you don't think that this is a Festool ad, I'll tell you something that I don't like. They make a system for drilling shelf pin holes, and I have it. It's really expensive, it's a pain to use, and I don't use it. So instead, I use these cheap Craig shelf pin jigs that I bought at Lowe's. I think they were maybe $10 or $15 each. You can link them together, and they're already spaced 32 millimeters apart, so they play nice with everything else. Now the cool thing is once you have this hole pattern, installing drawers is stupid simple. You just set your first one, and then you work your way up the line using whatever hole you need. Everything stays level and consistent, and it's one of those small things that makes a difference when you're using a smart system. When it comes to the top of your workbench, for years, I just used a regular old piece of 3/4 inch plywood, and it worked. The only thing I do differently is I put finish on it. I left mine raw, which was fine until I spilled glue on it and paint on it, and then I couldn't clean any of it up, which really bothered my perfectionism, as you can imagine. Another solid option is MDF. A lot of people use that. You can leave it raw and replace it when you need to, or you can laminate it with the top from Formica to make it glue resistant. A lot of people do that. Last year, Formica reached out to me and sent me something that I'd never used before or even seen called Formica Compact. As far as I can tell, it's basically a solid phenolic material. And this stuff is ridiculously dense, like more dense than my ex-girlfriend. Heavier than it has any right to be. Gosh. It's pretty funny. Sorry, Amber. I think I'm going to leave it in. Now, one mistake I made on my first bench was trying to add MFT style holes without really knowing what I was doing. I liked the idea of being able to clamp anywhere, so I grabbed a pencil, drew a grid, and just started drilling. And technically, it was a grid. It just wasn't precise, which was fine until I got to the point where I actually wanted to reference things squares and use dog holes and things like that. And then everything was off. So normally doing this, I would use something like the PARF guide, which is an awesome system out of the UK that lets you get crazy accurate hole spacing just using a drill and this thing called math that I know nothing about. I have one and I love it. But after working with this Formica Compact and realizing how hard it was just to cut, I had a feeling that drilling 140 holes by hand was not going to be a good time, and I didn't think the drill bit was going to last. So instead, I called a local friend of mine, Nick, who runs the woodshed in Weatherford, and asked him if I could borrow his CNC. He was nice enough to say yes, and so one afternoon I brought the top over, which is reason why you don't glue your tops down, people. It took about 90 minutes on his big monster of a CNC, and if it took that thing 90 minutes, I can only imagine how long it would have taken me by hand. This top is really, really nice, but honestly, for most people, just get plywood or MDF. You're gonna be fine. I'll show you one example of how I built some really simple drawers using 1/2-inch plywood I had laying around. And I'm pretty sure the way I built these is going to cause some real pearl clutching from the proper woodworkers who somehow clicked on one of my hack videos. I cut a 1/2-inch dado in both the sides and the front and back at the table saw, and then I snuck up on the sides of the bottom panel until it was a really tight fit with no movement. Now, here's where people are going to have opinions. The right way is to run your sides full length so that when you pull on the drawer front, you're not stressing that front joint. I did not do that. And it was on purpose because I'm not going to use a false front here. And I didn't want to see the dado on the face of the drawer. I'd rather hide it on the side where it's covered by the very affordable soft close slides that I found. Now, am I worried about it? No. I'm not putting a ton of stress on these, and if one ever does fail, I know exactly who built it and where to go for a warranty claim. I also found these little art bins with dividers, and they're perfect for organizing 6-inch sandpaper. Now this cabinet right here, I'm probably the most excited about it out of all the cabinets because I've lost count how many times, mid-glue up, I've had to stop everything, run across to the other side of the shop just to grab one more clamp that I have hanging on the wall. So I've always wanted clamp storage built into the bench. The idea here is to make a sliding panel that holds all the clamps and then slides out when I need to retrieve one and then goes right back in. And in classic hack fashion, I installed the slides wrong the first time. They definitely would not have held the weight like this. So off camera, I fixed it the way it should be. See, look right here. Here's the proof. This is how it should be. And now this thing works great. We also designed some custom hangers for these clamps, and I printed them on my 3D printer with some very strong filament. We did the same thing for track saw clamps with different holder sizes so I could really maximize the space here. This is honestly one of my favorite uses of 3D printing in the shop, and it's becoming more and more common every day. If you don't have a 3D printer or you don't want to mess with it, we've made these into an official product and we offer them on our website to save you the headache. I'm a big fan of the MicroJig Match Fit system. They make a bunch of different clamps, but these squeeze clamps are the ones that I use the most. Now, I used to have a really nice, expensive vise on my bench, but I took it off years ago and I replaced it with something a lot simpler. Basically, a shop-made vise made from laminated scraps with a grid of dovetail grooves routed into it. I highly recommend doing something like this in your shop. Now, I'm a little bit of a wimp when it comes to running big router bits, especially something like a dovetail bit. So instead of asking the router to do all the work, here's a hack tip. I like to remove most of the material first at the table saw, usually 2 passes to get close to a 1/4 inch groove. Then I take it to the router table just to shape the profile. It's smoother, less violent, and I'm sure it's a lot easier on the bit. Now for the short runs across the grain, I didn't really have a clean way to do that at the router table, so I tried something new, mounting the router to a track saw guide rail. In my last video, I did a pretty honest review of all the trim routers that I use and paid for with my own money, and I may have upset a few DeWalt fans when I said that I liked the Milwaukee the most, which is funny because I've been a Makita guy forever and none of those guys chimed in. See friends, this is what I'm talking about. When you plan ahead, sometimes things work out. Look at that transition. I love these clamps. A while back, I saw a video where a guy built a portable worktop and added something I'd never seen before, a small catch tray that he routed in for screws and hardware. Brilliant. So I'm absolutely stealing that idea, but instead of just copying it, I want to do what good artists try to do. Instead of copy and paste, I want to copy with taste. So we designed a template that I could 3D print to reference each corner and route out these pockets. Very slowly, because this Formica compact is no joke, so dense. And then I had a thought, what if these were magnetic? I wasn't sure it would work, but I found some really strong magnets, used Total Boat Thixo to glue them to the underside of the pockets, let that cure overnight, and then it was time to test the idea. And I kind of like it. I'm not totally sure the juice was worth the squeeze because routing this material was not fun and basically a half-day project. It was just too dense, like amber. But the result is great. So maybe the juice was worth the squeeze. Maybe that's what that means. Man, now I want some lemonade. On the opposite side of the bench, I built a few more general cabinets with some low-profile trays for small parts and random stuff. And here's how I like to cut integrated drawer pulls. I 3D print a simple template we made, stick it on with double-side tape, trace it, rough cut it with a jigsaw, and then I come back with a flush trim bit to clean it up. Now, if I wasn't a complete hack, I would have done this before assembling the trays so that I could add a nice chamfer on the back side for a better feel when opening them. But as the comments like to remind me, I am, in fact, a hack, and I didn't think about that. And since I'm not a real woodworker, we drew a shape on the computer, exported it as an SVG, brought it into the Shaper Origin, and had it cut these profiles for me. I glued them together with a scrap piece of plywood, cleaned the glue squeeze out with a straw because every now and then, hacks have good ideas, and I turned it into something I'm way more excited about than I actually should be, a butcher paper holder, which is going to be incredibly useful for finishing work on the bench. Because yeah, I could just get the Formica dirty and wipe it up, but why trigger my OCD when I can just ruin a piece of paper and throw it away? Now, eventually I'm going to use 3D printing to hang some tools I use most often on these end panels, but I'm not quite sure yet, so you don't see them. And here's the final reveal of a workbench that has been, honestly, 18 years in the making. It is so heavy, I think about 700 pounds. Surprised it actually rolls, but it is so heavy that it takes 2 people to lift it to disengage the wheels. This is my favorite part of the entire workbench. It's the simple things. I got tired of walking all over the shop to find them. To be able to have them right at my feet when I need them is pretty amazing. I wasn't sure if I would like these art bins and having my sandpaper organized, but I started to find another solution that is clear and cheaper. So for now, I'm gonna live with this. And it's always a good idea to have first aid stuff really handy. And again, instead of storing this on the other side of the shop in the corner, I have it right where I would need it. A lot of people put T-tracks alongside their workbench, which is fine. I really love the dovetail clamps from Microjig. I think they're far better than T-tracks. Some make a claim that they're stronger. And instead of storing these clamps somewhere else, I 3D printed a little holder so that I could store them right where I would need them. On the other side of the workbench, I have another SysAZ cabinet, and that's where I've chosen to put my domino and my domino tenons. These are my junk drawers, and I'm a big fan of making shallow drawers instead of big, deep drawers. The shallow drawers discourage you from piling too much stuff in there. And I know that I built these the incorrect way, but they're such lightweight, light duty, I'm honestly not worried about it. And if you followed the channel, you know this is a bit of a departure because usually I like slideless drawers. I have 2 videos about how I build cabinets in my shop without using hardware. But in this case, I think it made sense to use soft close drawer slides. And these ones I found, I don't even know the brand. They were super cheap. They were so cheap, I wasn't sure they were gonna be worth anything. But for light duty drawers like this, they actually turned out really, really well. In this bottom cabinet, I have hidden a vacuum pump because there is a secret feature of this that I have not shown you yet, and it's using what is called the vacuum dog. This is an idea that I wish I would have thought about because it's so simple, it's so obvious. Why didn't I think of that? Basically, this company makes these metal dogs that you can hook an airline to, and if you put a gasket over top of them, you can create a seal zone. And as you can see, pretty strong. I've got a hidden valve switch right below the top surface so I can switch the vacuum on and off without powering on and off the pump. While the low profile gasket is pretty nice, I prefer this vacuum pod thingy from Airweights that works with the bench dog. It nests inside your MFT holes. It lifts the work surface up just a little bit, which is really helpful if you're routing or doing joinery with a domino, sanding, things like that. I love the vacuum dog guys. They're an incredible small US business. So if you've never heard of them, go give them your support. When it comes to the top, I would have been fine with MDF, and I'm grateful that Formica sent me this top. It's super thick, super heavy, and having the MFT holes perfectly machined is, I hate to use the term game changer, but kinda a game changer. And if you don't have one of these match fit vices on your table, man, this is so easy. As you can see, I made it out of cheap pine scraps that I had laying around. It's really hard to beat. This is an incredible and affordable vertical work holding solution. And I can't believe that I've gone 18 years of woodworking without taking advantage of the cheap butcher paper roll trick. And now that I have it, I really love it. I've even started using it in projects, especially when you're adding finish. You don't have to worry about getting it all over the place. This stuff is so cheap, it's disposable anyway. If you've never tried it, give it a shot. If you want to build a workbench like this, but want all the guesswork taken out of it, the digital plans for this entire build are now available at whitworks.shop. They include step-by-step instructions, detailed illustrations, and all of the STL files for the 3D printed upgrades and jigs. We also have plans for hardware-less drawers if you want to build drawers and save some money, the miter saw station that you saw in this build, and tools like the whip plate for routers, track saw accessories, and the uber popular whip grip for those of you monsters who spent your kids' college fund on a domino. That's sarcasm. Love you long time.